when I gave the word. Now in the morning I sleep alone. Sweep the streets I used to own. I used to roll the dice, feel the fear in my enemy's eyes, listen as the crowd would sing. Now the old king is dead, long live the king. One minute I held the key, next the walls were closed on me, and I discovered that my castle stand upon pillars of salt and pillars of sand. I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, once you've gone it was never, never an honest word. And that was when I ruled the world. It was the wicked and wild wind, blew down the doors to let me in, shattered windows and the sound of drums. People couldn't believe what I'd become. Revolutionaries wait for my head on a silver plate, just a puppet on a lonely string. Oh, who would ever wanna be king? I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter won't call my name, never an honest word. But that was when I ruled the world. Hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter won't call my name, never an honest word. But that was when I ruled the world.
Those arguments aside, the most important part of the explanation for the Beatles' domination, and the reason they were not just the biggest British invasion band, but also arguably the greatest rock band of all time, is in the music itself. From their earliest recordings, they displayed an intense creativity and restlessness that resulted in virtually non-stop evolution and mastery of their chosen form. First, more than most others, they displayed a knack for adding subtle and deeply effective instrumental shading to simple forms. That is, they usually don't do much by way of changing the standard forms of pop songcraft, but they tend to set each section almost as though it is its own individual musical and textural world. Second, even in their most straightforward love songs, their lyrics tend to display a sense of depth and thoughtfulness and cleverness that gives them a broad range of appeal. You can interpret them as much as just absorb them, and this plays into their reputation as a thinking person's rock band. which becomes even further reinforced with their subsequent work. And finally, they write the most insanely catchy melodies. You hear them once, and they're stuck in your head literally for days. And then they make them even more memorable through simple performance tricks. Now that we've examined an array of early rock and roll, it's time to start drawing some connections between them, summarizing features that are common to all of them, in spite of the fact that they're very localized and very distinct in their own rights. First, going back to what I was saying at the very beginning of this section of the lecture, we note that in all rock and roll, there is this similarity in terms of a global palette of influences and appropriations. In other words, all of these rock and roll artists are borrowing very freely from all of the music that preceded them in popular music, as well as other things that are around them, especially local things that may or may not have a presence in the popular mainstream on a national level. We also notice that the instrumentation and other musical features are becoming very standardized, particularly once we get toward the end of this period. We note that there is some emphasis on recording techniques to try to specialize these recordings. In other words, to make the rock and roll recording sound more than just a live document, something that sort of exists on its own as a recording. And you heard some of those things in Chuck Berry's song in particular. We'll also note here that rock and roll, at least at the outset, is largely dominated first by ethnic minorities. As you noted, most of the folks playing here are either black or Hispanic in the case of Ritchie Valens, and also almost entirely dominated by male performers. In other words, there's very little female presence in rock and roll at the outset. That changes a little bit and relatively rapidly, but that's certainly true for most of the 1950s. So when we really come down to it, the thing that seems to really draw rock and roll together is this raw, unbridled expression. You heard this in Ritchie Valens' song, a very sloppy approach in a lot of cases. Certainly no disrespect to Ritchie Valens as a guitarist, but his soloing in that song is really sloppy, right? You also hear that in Little Richard, particularly in those kind of unhinged vocals. Okay? Chuck Berry is probably the most professionalized of all of these people. So what we're hearing, in other words, is this sense of really just going for it all the time in the musics, as well as in the lyrics, which oftentimes sort of revolves around some of the same sexual themes we heard in rhythm and blues, and even more importantly in the performance. And in order to give you a flavor of the impact of rock and roll here in the 1950s, I want to give you a chance to look at a video of Little Richard performing. I've got a link here, as well as the URL if you can't get the video to load just by clicking on the link, to a video of him performing in 1964 on television for a show called Shindig. And I'm going to ask you some questions about this performance after you watch the video. This will be question number 5. Watch the video paying really close, precise attention to his performance, thinking about all of his actions as you go through, things that you notice that are raw and unbridled, perhaps also some things that might connect with some of the influences that you talked about in the question about Little Richard and Tutti Frutti. Go ahead and watch that video, and then after you've done so, go to question 5 and answer it. And come back here to continue after that.